Welcome to Weekly News Highlights, where we wrap up your week with a glimpse back into what went on over the past week. I'm Kim Dami in Seoul. Over 80% of the newly added 2,000 seats will be allocated to schools outside the capital, the government decided. Professors, in the meantime, will reduce their working hours starting next Monday. The third Summit for Democracy took place here in South Korea this week, with invited world leaders, ministers, and members of civil society to present and discuss how to protect freedom and human rights in the face of growing digital threats posed by new technologies. The first Major League Baseball game of the new season took place here in Seoul on Wednesday. The Los Angeles Dodgers managed a late rally to crush the San Diego Padres 5-2. Medical professors who are set to resign next week say they are willing to reconsider the thoughts if the government is willing to negotiate. In the meantime, though, starting Monday, professors will be on duty with much reduced working hours. Choi Min-jung starts us off.
Even with doctors strongly against the medical school quota expansion, the government has pushed through with its plan. On Wednesday, Education Minister Lee Ju-ho announced more details about how the additional 2,000 places will be allocated. This came following an address by Prime Minister Han Duk-soo, who further stressed the need to increase the enrollment quota.
When considering various factors such as changing demographics, changes to society, and development in medicine, we thought it would be fundamentally impossible to provide proper medical care to people without increasing the number of medical personnel. An additional 2,000 doctors is the minimum required to tackle the doctor shortage.
2,000 additional places are mainly being distributed to medical schools outside the capital area, with around 82%, that is 1,639. State-run universities were guaranteed to have 200 places, while smaller medical schools that had fewer than 50 places have been allocated at least 100 to make sure the healthcare infrastructure is strengthened in areas outside the capital region. The remaining 361 seats went to medical schools in Gyeonggi-do Province and Incheon in order to narrow the gap in numbers between Seoul and other areas within the capital region. Based on the announcement, each university will have their new quotas reflected in their admission announcements for the 2025 academic year, which will be released to students in around May. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
South Korea has wrapped up the third Summit for Democracy, which invited world leaders, ministers, and members of civil society to discuss how to protect and advance freedom and human rights in the face of growing threats posed by new technologies. Now, this year, the theme was democracy for future generations. For more, we have our correspondent, Oh Soo-young, here in the studio. Welcome back, Soo-young.
Hi, Tammy. It's great to be here.
Soo-young, so the third edition of the summit put a much spotlight on elections and artificial intelligence, right?
Exactly. President Yoon Suk-yeol himself, actually, he led the leader session on AI, elections and fake news. And, well, with more than 60 countries representing half of the world's 8 billion people holding elections this year, Yoon stressed that it is more important than ever before to protect the foundation of democracy by holding fair elections.
특정 세력들이 조직적으로 제작하고 배포하는 가짜 뉴스는 단순히 잘못된 정보를 전파하는 것을 넘어 사회적 갈등과 분열을 야기합니다. 또한 가짜 뉴스는 국민들이 사실과 다른 정보를 바탕으로 잘못된 판단을 내리도록 선동함으로써 민주주의 근간인 선거를 위협하고 있습니다. 이는 민주주의에 대한 분명한 도발입니다.
He said the international community must work together to strictly enforce the law against foreign actors working to extend influence in elections in other countries, especially in this digital age where online users and spaces are highly exposed to falsehood and manipulation that can create content that's heavily curated with algorithms. In particular, he raised the need for countries to jointly develop AI and a digital mechanism to detect and eradicate forces that utilize the same technologies to generate fake news. Now, this was reflected in a document released after the summit on Thursday, as world leaders agreed that technological cooperation is needed to fight disinformation and the misuse of technology.
Soo-young, and the chair's summary was issued after the summit ended. Now, walk us through some of the key points there.
Right, so the chair's summary that set out the general direction of how democracies are going to address threats to freedom and rights across societies as they come. Now, it seems that the participants were on the same page about the need to counter fake news and the destabilizing effects of technology, as well as the need to reinforce electoral integrity, a fair justice system, and the freedom of media. Given the theme of the summit, Democracy for the Future Generation, there was a special focus on the role of young people in democratic governance, including reflecting their perspectives into decision-making processes. Now, this means more opportunities to enhance their political participation, as well as access to open and high-quality information. The same goes for women and marginalised groups. Another significant part of the discussions was supporting democratic systems in the Global South.
So it's very important to help the less or not as experienced democracies, because some of them might be smaller players in the world ecosystem, or they might not have the resources or the expertise to combat some of the, I'm not going to say spying, but sometimes some countries may want to influence others. So some of these do not have the tech capacity to defend themselves. It could be through hacking or whatnot. So it's important for the advanced countries to take the lead, help them with politics, policies, but also the technical side as well, to show them, yes, there's these risks, but we have some of the expertise, so let's all work on it together.
And moderating these discussions, I'm sure, must have been very significant for South Korea because it became the first to host the U.S.-initiated Summit for Democracy outside the United States.
You're exactly right, Tammy. In fact, the country's unique experience of rising from the ashes of the Korean War, impoverished and under the attack of communist forces, to the liberal democratic society that leads the world in IT and popular culture today. Now, this stood out to observers around the world and really highlighted the potential of South Korea in renewing faith in democracy. Now, observers say that Seoul is uniquely positioned to lead this global renewal of democracy, as they put it, in an era where freedom across societies is on a worrying decline. Now, in a written column for Foreign Policy, Damon Wilson, president of the US-based National Endowment for Democracy, and Lin Lee, the US-based foundation's East Asia director, said that South Korea's experience of homegrown democracy can show how free speech, free markets, and political competition can be universal for all societies, not just Western countries. They said South Korea's soft power, supercharged by K-pop, of course, and its level of digital innovation, these were all made possible by its freedom of expression. Going forward, they said that other democracies, they need to back South Korea as it leads in promoting democratic institutions, especially in the Indo-Pacific and the Global South.
Korea is quite liked by many other countries, so it's good to kind of leverage this and show, yes, there's the American style of democracy, but in Asia, countries like Korea, with its very dense population tech, democracy could also work in this kind of nature as well. So I think it's very good to show the different levels, different types of democracy, especially in terms of key themes like tech, AI. So I think in that perspective, it was very important.
But Soo-young, some countries were opposed to South Korea holding the summit, right?
Yes, I imagine you're talking about China or Russia. And indeed, as the US-led summits for democracy focus on promoting freedom, human rights, and the rule of law across all societies to make them open, they have to counter the rather authoritarian and autocratic forces that are not only suppressing freedom and using technology to control their societies, but are suspected of attempting to influence other countries as well. That is, in fact, the very reason why the Summit for Democracy was first launched in 2021. So you'd see why China and Russia, they would have to pay special attention to the conference. Of course, for China, there's also the issue of Taiwan being included in the opening ceremony. Beijing expressed firm opposition to Taiwan's Minister of Digital Affairs, Audrey Tang, participating unannounced virtually on Monday. And it accused the summit of weaponizing the principle of democracy and urged South Korea to adhere to the One China principle. In response, South Korea's foreign ministry said Tuesday that Seoul's position of respecting the One China principle remains unchanged and that the summit does not single out countries in ideological confrontation, but it's all about reinforcing universal values for humanity. According to Tae-Ju, professor of Chinese studies at Kyung University, Beijing's reaction to the summit was largely expected.
China was already very dissatisfied with South Korea's position on the South China Sea and its call for the freedom of navigation. Then, not long ago, South Korea's Air Force landed an aircraft in Taiwan and refueled. So, as South Korea held the Summit for Democracy, it seems Beijing, in its highly sensitive response, used the occasion to project its discontent.
According to Chu, the summit's focus on AI also rings alarm bells.
Currently, there aren't universal standards and norms established in most areas of emerging tech, especially in the AI field and fourth industrial revolution technologies. While Russia and China are part of global discussions on technical standards, they seem afraid that there might be exclusive meetings and agreements that they're not part of.
As countries compete to build new standards to govern new technologies on top of the technologies themselves, these discussions on establishing rules and guardrails around them matter, and now it seems that South Korea is at the center of those discussions. In 2024, Seoul will be hosting an AI safety summit, which was launched in the UK last year, and co-hosting the second conference on the responsible use of AI in the military domain.
All right, Seung, we look forward to those updates.
Sure, anything for you, Tammy.
All right, thank you for that report today, Seung.
Thanks for your time, Tammy.
South Korea's low birth rate and aging population are posing a threat to economic growth, as the country's workforce is expected to start declining in 2028. That is according to the Korea Employment Information Service on Tuesday, saying that the economically active population would grow by around 316,000 between 2022 and 2032. This is only a tenth of the growth recorded in the previous 10 years, mainly because of the aging society, where a fifth of the population is expected to be aged over 65 by 2025. The agency says while the healthcare industry is expected to boom as a result, growing online and automated services will lead to declines in the retail and manufacturing industries. North Korea this week claimed to have successfully conducted a ground test of a solid fuel engine for longer-range hypersonic missiles. Our defense correspondent Choi Min-jung tells us what this means.
North Korea has claimed success in a ground test of a solid fuel engine for a new medium to long-range hypersonic missile. The North Korean Central News Agency reported Wednesday that Pyongyang conducted the test at a launching station near the west coast the day before, under the supervision of leader Kim Jong-un. Kim reportedly expressed great satisfaction with what he called the successful completion of the Strategic Weapons Development Plan presented back in 2021. Hypersonic missiles are among the list of weapons Kim vowed to develop within 5 years after the plan was announced. The regime conducted its first ground test of the engine last November. In January this year, the North test-fired a solid-fuel IRBM tipped with a hypersonic warhead. Experts say Tuesday's engine test was carried out as part of efforts to correct flaws discovered then.
The launch in January did not have a sufficient flight range despite it being a medium to long-range missile. They had to verify once again that it can fly up to a range of about 3,500 kilometers. So it appears that they increased the combustion time of the rocket's first stage to increase the flight range.
The North appears to have conducted the engine test on the ground instead of test firing a missile this time to avoid tensions with Japan.
North Korea is currently showing relative restraint in firing in the direction of Japan's exclusive economic zone. Although we still have to wait and see, we can see that this is ultimately a sign of caution and consideration in preparation for future dialogue with Japan.
Hypersonic missiles are designed to travel at more than 5 times the speed of sound and often maneuver at relatively low altitudes, making them harder to detect and intercept. While North Korea's ICBMs are mainly designed to reach the U.S. mainland, this IRBM can be seen as a weapon system with the main purpose of targeting U.S. military bases in Guam or Japan. Eyes are on whether the North will soon test launch a hypersonic medium to long-range missile equipped with Tuesday's newly tested engine. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
And to better address evolving security concerns, namely North Korea's hostile weapons ambitions, South Korea's defense ministry shared its action plan for the year. Our Choi Min-jung has details.
South Korea's defense ministry has announced 3 major tasks for this year to make the country a global pivotal state that embodies peace through strength. First, to boost the country's military, the ministry will prioritize strengthening response capabilities against North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. This will be done by advancing South Korea's space technology in the defense sector. Seoul successfully launched its first military reconnaissance satellite last December and plans to launch 2 more this year, one in April and another in November. The country will also deploy a newly developed homegrown tactical surface-to-surface missile which can precisely strike the regime's command facilities for the very first time this year. The ministry also aims to expand the scope of defense cooperation with countries that share the same values. Last year, South Korea and the U.S. established the Nuclear Consultative Group to strengthen extended deterrence against nuclear threats posed by the North. This year, the 2 sides will establish joint nuclear operation guidelines, conduct exercises and training that mimic the response to a North Korean nuclear attack, and expand the deployment of U.S. strategic assets on the peninsula. Lastly, the ministry plans to boost strategic defense capabilities through the K-defense industry. It explained that if South Korea's defense exports and production cooperation increase, a supply of Korean-made weapons and ammunition would be available from overseas. These could be utilized in times of emergency and would also generate economic growth. South Korea also said it will make efforts for the signing of the Reciprocal Defense Procurement Agreement between Seoul and Washington to help ease trade barriers for bilateral arms exports. Defense Minister Shin Won-sik said that the ministry will do its best to ensure that national defense also helps the nation's economy. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
UN experts say North Korea has obtained half of its total foreign currency income through cyber theft. It also believes that the 40% of the stolen income is used for developing weapons of mass destruction. Lee Seung-ja has more.
The UN Security Council Sanctions Committee on North Korea on Wednesday released its biannual report, which included details of military and political tensions on the Korean peninsula over the 6 months from July 2023 to January 2024. The report said that not only have tensions on the Korean peninsula heightened, but that according to a panel of experts, North Korea obtained half of its total foreign currency income through financial theft, via hacking, and cyber attacks. They added that such funds were obtained to cover 40% of the resources needed for developing weapons of mass destruction. The report says while there hasn't been a 7th nuclear test, the regime has been developing additional nuclear weapons and producing fissile materials to avoid UNSC sanctions. The panel pointed out that the continuous cyber attacks targeting the virtual asset industry is also a means of generating revenue by avoiding UNSC sanctions. As the crippling sanctions made it nearly impossible to obtain foreign currency needed to develop nuclear weapons and other missile technologies, hacking is used as the main means of earning such income. The report stated that it's currently investigating 17 cases of virtual currency theft last year in which North Korea was suspected to have been involved. The total amount stolen through such means amounts to $750 million. When looking at the amount stolen by North Korean hacking organizations between 2017 and 2023, the figure is a staggering $3 billion. The report also said the possibility of a technology transfer between Pyongyang and Moscow which further fuels the regime's continued nuclear weapons development, is currently being investigated. The Sanctions Committee inspects the implementation of the international community's UNSC sanction against North Korea and reports the results of its activities to the UN twice a year. 이승재, Arirang News.
Russian President Vladimir Putin will reportedly travel to China in May for talks with Xi Jinping as part of his diplomatic priorities, having secured a fifth term in office. According to a Reuters report on Tuesday, this could be the first overseas trip of his new presidential term after being re-elected last Sunday. Xi also visited Russia for his first overseas trip following the start of his third consecutive term in March last year, with the reciprocated gesture set to come after Putin's former inauguration around May 7th. A summit with North Korea's Kim Jong-un is also believed to be on the cards, with observers predicting that such a trip could come in the second half of the year. A Kremlin spokesperson said that Putin's schedule for a visit to the north is being coordinated through diplomatic channels, but there were no plans to visit before and immediately after the presidential election. Now, analysts suspect that Putin is treating carefully amid reports of arms trade between the two sides that violate UN Security Council resolutions. Hong Kong's national security law was unanimously passed by its parliament on Tuesday. Now, this means strict measures, including imposing a maximum sentence of life imprisonment for those dissenting against the government. Lee Seung-ja has more.
The Safeguarding National Security Law was unanimously passed by Hong Kong's Legislative Council on Tuesday, expanding the government's power to punish anyone who goes against the state. Article 23 includes new measures on treason, espionage, external interference, state secrets, and sedition. The bill was first presented on March 8th and was quickly put up for vote less than 2 weeks later. The 90-seat council, which consists of mainly pro-China loyalists, saw 88 lawmakers and the council's president vote unanimously to enact the new national security law. The newly passed bill includes 39 security crimes and their punishments. It also means harsher punishments for those who commit those crimes. The maximum penalty is life imprisonment for treason or rebellion and up to 20 years for espionage with the intent to jeopardize national security. Some lesser offenses, including the possession of seditious publications, could also lead to several years in jail. While many citizens are concerned by the passing of the bill, lawmakers believe it will make Hong Kong a safer place.
Whatever comes, it'll come. We don't mind. You can see other countries do everything to protect their national security. And why can't we protect our national security? Okay? Be it downgrade, be it whatever, we don't mind.
Meanwhile, Washington says Hong Kong's new national security law has the potential to accelerate the closing of a once open society as it's analyzing the potential risks to U.S. citizens and American interests.
We believe that these kinds of actions have the potential to accelerate the closing of Hong Kong's once open society. So we're analyzing this legislation and we are taking a look at what the potential risk could be to not just U.S. citizens, but other American interests that we might have.
An attempt to pass a version of the national security law in 2003 was met with massive street protests that drew 500,000 people and led to the withdrawal of the legislation. It also comes after similar legislation was introduced in China in 2020, which has largely silenced the pro-democracy protests seen in 2019. The law goes into effect Saturday. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The first Major League Baseball game of the new season took place here in Seoul on Wednesday. Tickets for Wednesday's match sold out in just 15 minutes. The Los Angeles Dodgers put on a late rally to crush the San Diego Padres 5-2. Japanese superstar player Ohtani made his debut and helped the Dodgers to a comeback win over the Padres. Now, Park Chan-ho, the legendary baseball player who was in 1994, became the first South Korean player ever to play in the MLB, also made an appearance throwing out the ceremonial first pitch in Wednesday's game because of his remarkable connection with both the Dodgers and the Padres. Now, after the SeoulSeries, the MLB Tour moves on to Mexico City in April and London in June. The Great Train Express is set to begin operations next week, bringing with commute times of around 30 minutes to Seoul from the greater capital area. This is especially great news for people who have to travel at least an hour every morning and evening because of work. Our Park Kwon-woo was on board to get the commuter experience.
Commuting to Seoul in just 30 minutes. A new high-speed train, the Great Train Express, or GTX, is preparing to begin operations, allowing people to reach Seoul City from the greater metropolitan area in about 30 minutes.
GTX's operation will bring innovation to our everyday lives in terms of transportation.
The new train network is one of the pledges made by the Yoon administration to reduce commuting times in the capital area, with 3 lines, A, B, and C, set to open. The A line is set to begin operating partially from March 30th. People using the GTX will be able to reach Seoul from metropolitan areas much quicker. Train journeys on the GTX A line running from Suseok, southern Seoul, to Dongtan in Gyeonggi-do province will only take about 20 minutes. The same trip by car or on other public transport takes over an hour. The government plans to fully open the A line that crosses Seoul from the south to the north earlier this year, along with the B and C lines in the next several years. An official from Korea National Railway said the government is cooperating with local governments so that rail networks can be extended to other regions outside the Seoul metropolitan area to create an economically hyper-connected area that cuts across various regions. The GTX runs at more than twice the speed of subway trains, reaching speeds of 180 kilometers per hour, meaning that at full capacity, 1,062 people on board can make it to their destinations quicker. This train will run 60 times a day from 5:30 a.m. to 1 a.m., with about a 20-minute interval between each departure. The seats are 3 centimeters wider than on regular subway trains, making for a more comfortable ride. And each carriage has an air purifier, along with eco-friendly carpet on the floor. According to the Transport Ministry, the fare from Suseok to Dongtan will be 4,451, which converts to $3.36 at the current rate. However, there have been some concerns about safety at GTX stations due to the greater volume of people that will come with the new service.
I am a bit worried because Suseok is already very busy as it is a transfer station with other high-speed trains and subways operating there as well.
Korea National Railway said it had already looked into safety concerns and used methods including simulations and is satisfied that there's no need to worry. Park Kwon-woo, Arirang News.
This is all we have for this week. We thank you for watching Weekly News Highlights. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.